James Okafor stood up from seat 4B on a Delta flight from Atlanta to New York, a first-class seat he had purchased 11 weeks in advance, with 87,000 loyalty points accumulated over 9 years of weekly business travel. Stood up when the gate agent told him, in front of a full boarding cabin, that his seat was needed for operational reasons. And instead of arguing, instead of demanding to see a supervisor, instead of any of the things a man in a $1,000 seat on a Tuesday morning is entitled to do, he looked at the gate agent, looked at the woman who was being guided into his seat, took his carry-on from the overhead bin, and said, clearly enough for the first 4 rows to hear, "I'll be at the gate. I'll be filing a formal complaint with a dot in 30 minutes. And I'll be on the next flight, in first class." Then he walked off the plane, sat down at gate C14, opened his laptop, and began writing. What James Okafor wrote in the next 27 minutes, and what he did in the 9 months that followed, would appear on Family Feud, be seen by 261 million people, lead to a congressional subcommittee hearing on airline seating equity, and cause a gate agent named Patricia Volkov to send James Okafor a handwritten letter of apology that he kept on his desk until the day he testified in Washington. It was a Monday afternoon in April, 9 months after the flight, when the Okafor family walked onto the Family Feud stage in Atlanta. James was 44, tall, with the measured, deliberate manner of a man who had spent 20 years in corporate law and learned early that the way you enter a room tells people everything before you open your mouth. His wife Adaizi was beside him. Their daughter Zara, 13, was 2 steps behind, with the straight-faced dignity of a teenager who had decided this was actually very cool, but was not going to say so. James's brother Emmanuel and Emmanuel's wife Clara rounded out the team. Steve made a joke about Emmanuel's handshake that Emmanuel took as the compliment it was intended to be. James smiled at the right moments. He answered Steve's warm-up questions with humor and precision. He was very good at this, at being exactly what the room needed. He had been doing it his whole professional life. He was doing it now. And nobody in that studio knew what was underneath it, or what he had decided, quietly, on a plane seat he was no longer sitting in 9 months ago. But Steve Harvey, who can read a room the way other people read text, was watching James Okafor's eyes. And his eyes were somewhere else. James Okafor had his first business trip at 26, a junior associate at a firm in Chicago, middle seat in economy, a 3-hour flight to Washington for a deposition. He had arrived 15 minutes early, sat in his assigned seat, and been asked by a flight attendant to verify his boarding pass because, she explained with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "We just want to make sure everything is in order." His seatmates, both white, both men, both in the same cheap economy row, were not asked to verify anything. James verified his boarding pass. He sat down. He flew to Washington. He conducted the deposition. He flew home. He wrote nothing down. He told no one. Over the following 18 years, he tracked the incidents the way you track something you hope will eventually stop. The hotel front desk that lost his reservation despite a confirmation number. The conference room where the junior colleague got the handshake and James got the nod. The restaurant that seated the party behind him before him despite the reservation. He tracked them in a note on his phone, not obsessively, just accurately, because he was a lawyer, and lawyers document things, and because some part of him believed that if he documented enough of them, he would eventually find the pattern useful. The flight to New York was entry number 47. He had been in seat 4B for 11 minutes when Patricia Volkov came down the aisle. She was the senior gate agent. She said, in the practiced polite voice of someone delivering news they expect to be non-negotiable, "Mr. Okafor, we need to make an adjustment to your seating. We have an operational requirement that requires your seat, and we'll be placing you in. James said. What operational requirement? She said, there's a passenger with a specific need, he said. What specific need? She said, I'm not able to share passenger details, he said. I purchased this seat 11 weeks ago with 87,000 loyalty points. I have a status of Diamond Medallion. I would like to know the specific operational requirement that supersedes a confirmed first-class booking. She said, I understand your frustration. He said, I'm not frustrated. I'm asking a question. She did not answer the question. He looked past her. The woman being guided to his seat was white, 50s, carrying a single bag. She was not in a wheelchair. She had no visible mobility requirement. She had boarded after James. He looked at her. She looked away. He stood up. He took his carry-on. He said the thing he said. He walked to gate C14. He opened his laptop and wrote for 27 minutes. He wrote a formal complaint to the Department of Transportation's Aviation Consumer Protection Division, citing the date, flight number, seat number, loyalty status, advance purchase date, the precise sequence of the conversation with the gate agent, and the observable facts of who had been placed in his seat and under what apparent circumstances. He attached a screenshot of his booking confirmation. He cited Regulation 14 CFR Part 250. He submitted the complaint at 9:02 a.m. He boarded the next flight, in first class, as he had said he would. He told Daisy that evening. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 47. He said, yes. She said, you wrote them all down. He said, yes. She said, what are you going to do? He said, I already did it. Over the following weeks, he was contacted by the DOT. He provided additional documentation. He was contacted by a journalist from the Washington Post who had seen the complaint through a public records request. He was contacted by 2 other black business travelers who had had similar experiences and wanted to know how he had filed. He talked to all of them. He kept his voice level. He stated facts. He did not perform outrage. He did not need to. His daughter Zara asked him one evening, while he was at his desk reviewing documents, Daddy, are you mad about the plane seat? He looked up. He said, no, baby, I'm organized. She looked at him for a moment. She said, is organized better than mad? He said, much better. For much longer. She thought about this. Then she said, in the particular way of 13-year-olds who have absorbed more than they've been told, Daddy, is that your seat? Pointing at the document on his screen. He said, it will be. He applied to Family Feud because Emmanuel had suggested it at Sunday dinner, and Zara had said yes before anyone else could respond, and because James Okafor had decided, over 9 months of being organized, that he wanted to be somewhere that day where the seat was already his. Steve would later call what James Okafor did in those 27 minutes at Gate C14 the most precise act of dignity he had ever heard described on his show. The fast money round was done. James had scored 184 points, $16,000 short of the full prize. When Steve looked at him and said, James, you're a lawyer. You've been thinking about something since you walked out here. I can see it. What is it? James looked at him. He said, you want the whole story? Steve said, I want the whole story. James told it. 11 minutes. Entry 47. Gate C14. 27 minutes. All of it. He told it the way he told everything. Facts first. Sequence exact. No performance. When he finished, he said, I didn't stand up and shout. I didn't make a scene. I filed a complaint and I boarded the next flight. Because I have 47 entries in a note on my phone, and I decided that number 47 was going to mean something. The studio fell completely silent, not the usual game show pause, a different kind of silence entirely. Steve Harvey placed his cards on the podium. Slowly, he stepped back. He looked at James Okafor for a long moment. Then he said, "Cut. Everything. I'm stopping this show. No approval from anybody." A stage manager stepped in. Steve held up his hand. He said, "This has never happened." A host stopping a taping mid-scoring to address what I'm about to address. It's happening now. He walked forward. He said, "I was living in my Ford Tempo. I had nothing. And I know what it is to walk into rooms where people had already decided what you were before you opened your mouth. I know what it is to be reseated. I know what it is to be the person in the room they think can be moved." And James Okafor didn't scream. He didn't perform. He opened his laptop and wrote 27 minutes of perfect documentation. And then he boarded the next flight. Because he knew that organized beats mad every time, and for much, much longer. He stopped. He looked at the cameras. "I want Delta Airlines to know that this moment is going to follow that flight number for as long as the internet exists. And I want every black business traveler in America to know your seat is always yours. No operational requirement changes that." He said, quietly but fully, that seat was always yours. He wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and called his wife Marjorie on the stage of Family Feud. He said, "Marjorie, I need you to connect me with the head of the Congressional Aviation Subcommittee. I want James Okafor in Washington to testify about airline seating equity before the end of the year." He ended the call. He turned to James. He said, "You've been building a case for 9 months. I want you to finish it somewhere it matters." He announced both families, the Okafors and the competing family, the Thomases from Memphis, were walking out with the full $20,000 prize. The Thomas family crossed the stage without being asked. The oldest Thomas, a man named Walter, who was 68, shook James's hand and said, "My son flies for business too. Thank you for writing it down." The episode aired 7 weeks later. 261 million views. The hashtag #OrganizedBeatsMad trended in 18 countries for 9 days. Delta Airlines issued a public statement expressing regret about the customer's experience and committed to a third-party audit of its upgrade and seat change practices. Patricia Volkov sent the handwritten letter 4 weeks after the episode aired. It said, "In part, I have thought about that morning every day since. I should have asked more questions. I'm sorry." James kept it on his desk. 3 months after the taping, James Okafor testified before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Aviation. He brought his documentation. He spoke for 11 minutes. He was precise. He cited the 47 entries. He proposed 3 specific regulatory amendments. 2 were incorporated into a proposed airline consumer protection bill that passed committee the following spring. A year after the taping, entry 47 was the last entry in the note. Not because nothing happened after that. Because James Okafor decided he was done counting and ready to change the count. Today, that seat was always yours. The foundation James and Adeze established provides legal advocacy and complaint documentation support for travelers who experience discriminatory seat removals, upgrade denials, and boarding irregularities. It has supported 2,100 travelers across the country and has a formal partnership with the DOTS Aviation Consumer Protection Division for priority case review. Its motto is the 6 words James said to Zara at his desk: "Organized beats mad." Every single time. He is a Diamond Medallion member. He still flies every week. He still sits in 4B. In a first-class cabin on a Tuesday morning, a man stood up from a seat he had earned and walked to a gate and opened a laptop. He did not shout. He did not make a scene. He wrote 27 minutes of facts and boarded the next flight. Because the opposite of powerlessness is not volume. It is precision. It is documentation. It is the 47 entries. It is the next flight, in first class, as promised, and the 7 months after that, and the testimony in Washington, and the foundation, and the note on his phone that finally stopped at a number that meant something. Have you ever chosen to be organized when someone expected you to be loud? Have you ever had a seat that was yours and had to fight to keep it? Share your story in the comments. If James's 27 minutes moved you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to know that dignity doesn't require volume. And ring that notification bell, because some people win by sitting exactly where they belong.